Hey everybody, it's Richard Thomas and I am excited to be the host here at the Lionheart Institute podcast. I am here today with co-host Tiffany Thomas. Say hello.
Hi everyone.
And we are excited about bringing you a great episode. We want to talk to you a little bit about courage today and what it really takes to get to your goals. We do a lot to talk about social injustice, and we talk about the struggle, power to the people. We talk about overcoming things as a family and overcoming the obstacles that are presented to us. But I really want to talk to you about what it takes internally to become great. As a young man, most people wouldn't understand this if they didn't grow up in the inner city of where I grew up. But where I grew up was a changing demographic. And so in my inner city, there was a collision of kind of sorts where a new gang moved into our area. And so our city was changing. The demographics were changing, and we went from being a predominantly African-American community to a Hispanic community. And so we still remained a people of color community in the sense there was diversity kind of ruled the blocks of my city. But growing up, there was this particular park right next to my house. I could throw a rock from my backyard and hit the park itself. And at this park was a firing range for police officers. And so I became very accustomed to seeing police officers, and they became very accustomed to seeing us. It was kind of their downtime. So they came with an intentionality of kind of protecting and serving, but it was really much more for them than it was for their position as far as being on staff. So they didn't come really on duty. They came off duty practicing their responsibilities. And so they were still police officers, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But they didn't come with that same kind of intensity of, hey, I'm on the clock right now. So they really weren't watchdogging us in any kind of a format. They were there to shoot, and if there was something that popped off, they were engaged because that's what they had to do. But in my neighborhood growing up, this park right next to my home changed. And so I went from knowing all the kind of gangbangers in the park to everybody was brand new. And for me, that was a little bit of a challenge because I was never anyone to really get super involved in gangs, but I also didn't really cower down to gangs, meaning I never shrank from the intimidation or the new flow of it. And so this new gang, being Hispanic, I wasn't Hispanic, even though in ways I could have passed probably. I faced a whole new world, right? And so I'm walking down the street from home, and they tell me that they kind of give me the new rules of the park. And those new rules of the park included me crossing the street to get home. And I'll be damned if I was going to cross anybody's street for me to walk a half a block. And so I didn't have a whole lot of options as far as that was going to go down. Either I was going to cross the street or I was going to get into a fight to make me cross the street. And so something inside of me, call it fight or flight, whatever it may be. I remember walking home one afternoon from school, and I got down on one knee. I looked my little sister in the eyes and I said, "Baby girl, I love you. It's time for you to cross the street." And here I am like the hurricane in the cell. One of y'all coming in, but y'all leaving limping, right? And so I kind of came to the gang in front of me, and they told me to cross the street. And they're yelling at me across the street, and they said, "We're going to beat your ass if you don't cross the street." Well, I wasn't really a very good fighter. That wasn't my skill set. I was much more of just kind of a junkyard dog. I had a lot of tenacity. I had a lot of toughness. But as far as my skills and being a polished fighter, I was far from that. We had a guy that, growing up, was a boxing instructor down the street from us. And I grew up wanting to be a boxer so bad that I would go down to his house and I'd ask him to teach me how to fight. And so he would never pay attention to me. And then one day he decided he was going to help me become a great fighter. And so I remember going home and telling my dad, "Dad, I want to become a fighter." And my dad said, "No, you ain't going to fight today. There ain't no how, no way." And he said, "You're too pretty to fight." And I said, "You got that right. I am too pretty to fight, but I'm going to learn how to lay these hands on somebody." And so he came up to the guy that lived at the end of the street, came by to my house to pick me up to go to boxing instruction. I guess he had a boxing bag and, speed bag and jumping rope and all that stuff.
Right.
And so he came by to pick me up, and he knocked on the door, and And my dad opened the door. I don't know why I didn't open it. And he said, hey, I'm here to get Ricky, they called me at the time. I'm here to pick up Ricky to go practice fighting. My dad said, I told my son he's not going to be a fighter. And this guy said, hey, why don't you let your young man become a real man and learn how to fight? And so my dad, very politely, very kindly, very respectfully, said, my son isn't going to learn how to fight. Have a good day. And he went to shut the door. And as he went to shut the door, this gentleman put his foot in my house. And I remember him sticking his foot in the door, my dad putting his hand in his chest and walking him out on the porch. And the next thing I know is this guy's laying on the ground. And I looked at my dad. I said, Dad, he's not my boxing instructor. Why don't you become my boxing instructor? Because if I'm going to learn, I want to learn the right way. Right. But I never really did get any formal instructions. And so for me, it was all just scrapping, right? I was just laying hands and just swinging like a wild man, just trying to survive. But what I did on day one is I picked the smallest, scrawniest guy that I could find. And even though there were, I think, 5 or 6 guys that jumped me, I attacked that little guy. And sure enough, he got poked in the eye. And so 4 of them came in, but one of them caught these hands. Right. And that was my goal. And so for the next 30 days, it's kind of crazy. I remember it as the month from hell for me in a lot of ways. It was like 2020 just for a 6th grader. I remember literally every day, and I got kicked out of school one day that month for fighting. So that's 32 fights. I got in another fight on my way home that was separated from this. So that's 34 fights in 1 month that I remember counting was kind of my record. And then we ended up moving from Los Angeles to Washington. But I brought that up not because I want to glorify fighting. That's not the point of it. I don't want to glorify the skills necessarily of being a fighter. But I want to talk a little bit about overcoming the obstacles that exist in our life. We talk a lot about social injustice, and we talk about the system, and we talk about a system that's really set up for you to fail. However, there is something inside of each one of us that can overcome any obstacle that's set in front of us. Whether that's institutional racism, whether that's hate, whether that's a learning disability, which I struggled with, and I think if I recall correctly, you might share a little bit about that from your own life. Right. But really having to face the enemies that face us. And really when it comes to courage, and you're going to have a whole lot of it if you're ever going to overcome the obstacles that exist in your life. So true. Yeah. If you really are going to embrace overcoming obstacles and how that process works, it's going to take a ton of courage. And I say this all the time to people, your knuckles just ain't scarred enough. Right. And what I mean by that is you just haven't thrown enough blows. You haven't fought the fight. You haven't gone through what it's going to take to get to that next level. And fear is oftentimes the obstacle, right? It's oftentimes that terror barrier that really holds us back from reaching our full potential. It's not necessarily the external enemies that we know are real in the world today, but it's really that enemy in a me that we really have to face.
So true.
And I know for you, now you're working on your master's degree. You started a little bit later in life, right? But just as the co-host of the Lionheart Institute podcast, share a little bit about what kind of courage did it take for you not going straight to school right after high school. I don't think you did, right?
I did for a couple years, actually.
Okay, and then taking some time off. Right. And then making that decision to go back post-child. Share a little bit about that, because I think that a lot of times people think that, hey, I'm going to get to a certain level in life. I'm going to get stuck there if I'm not careful, because they don't really exhibit the courage that it takes. They have the skills, they have the ability, they have the internal aptitude and ability to really achieve at a high level, but they really lack the courage to say, you know what, I'm going to face the things I got to face. I'm going to wrestle with the enemies I have to wrestle with which most of the time is internal, right? It's an internal mindset that you have to overcome. And then how did you kind of at the little bit later than most people will get started on their bachelor's decide, you know what, all of that set aside, I'm going to show the courage that it really takes to overcome the obstacles, and you can share if you want to what some of those obstacles were, to really get about reaching a higher level in my life?
Right. Like you said, so right after graduation, I took a year off, actually. And I had a lot going on in my life. I did a lot of extracurricular activities. I was really big into music and theater, so
Right.
I was doing a lot. Plus, I had a job my senior year in high school, so I was going to school, extracurricular stuff, and a job. So needless to say, I was a little burned out by the time I graduated.
Sure.
Also, nobody really had spent a lot of time talking to me about college and that next phase of life. It wasn't really a common conversation that anybody had with me as far as my plans, what college was I going to go to. It wasn't something that was kind of upmost in my thoughts at the time because it really wasn't a lot of conversation or encouragement to go that route.
Okay.
So I took a year off. Then I went back and I actually went to Green River Community College
Okay.
for a couple years. Did a lot of...
Which is a great plan for
Right.
most people that they overlook, right?
Right, especially if you don't know what you want to do. You can get some courses out of the way at a much more reasonable price.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense for a lot of people who are kind of just trying to fill things out.
Well, far too many people, I think, start the plan
Right.
thinking they have to have the full picture of the plan.
True.
And you don't necessarily have to see the end. You just have to see the first step, right? Have a general idea of where you're going, but that does take courage in that sense. So.
Right. Well, I spent a couple years doing that. I was working full time, and then I was going to school throughout my work schedule, trying to find time to be able to do that. And I did that for a couple years, and then I had some things going on with my family, some sick family members that I needed to take some time off to take care of and help. And so I kind of stepped back out of that for a while, and then just kind of went on with life. I think when you take yourself out of good
The power
habits,
of distraction, right?
Right. You just get distracted. Life happens, and you just kind of get into routines and habits, and you just keep moving forward. You just kind of forget about what you were doing and move on to the next. So that I did that for several years, and honestly, it was almost 10 years later, right, when I made the choice to go back to school. And that choice came because I was a single mom. And at the time, Logan was about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, where am I going in life? Right? It was just him and I.
Sure.
And I was living across the country from most of my family. And all I could think about was, how do I give him a better life? Lots of times when you have kids, and a lot of parents can probably understand this, especially single parents, we put our dreams aside because it's not necessarily realistic in what we need to do for our children.
It's funny you would say that. I heard a great speaker one time talk about how cool parents become post-graduation for their kids, right? Their clothes get better, right. Their cars get better. All of a sudden, things that their taste in music gets better.
Yeah.
What they invest in gets better, right?
Right.
It's just because all of a sudden now they're in a place where they're able to take their eyes off of the necessity of raising
Right.
this child, and they're able to actually remember, wait a minute, what are the things that I enjoy? Maybe I don't want to walk around with holes in my socks for the rest of my life, right? And they're able to invest in themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
But that usually does take, it didn't take this for you. It didn't take a major event of your child graduating.
Right.
Or someone getting sick in your family for you to say, hey, I've got to go back to school.
Yeah.
It took something different. It took an internal courage to say, I don't want to be stuck here.
Right.
Unfold that a little bit for us.
It's so easy to get stuck. As you said, we just get into routines and habits that aren't always the right routines and the right habits. We just get stuck there doing it. And that's where I found myself. I had a plan graduating high school. Music and theater was my life. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be an actress. It's something that I had devoted so much time in my youth to doing. Spent a lot of time on stage doing that, and it was something that I was very passionate about, something that I was very good at, something that I wanted to pursue. And it's interesting how life just happens, and you're on this path, and then boom, something knocks you off of it, and then you just try to figure out, how do I keep going? And then along life, I finally get into a good place for me personally. I'd been through a huge roller coaster of lots of life events. And I finally found a place where I was like, okay, I'm in a good place, trying to figure out myself, my life. And then I had Logan. And that changed my entire world. And at that point in time, the same goals that I had, the same dreams that I had, all of a sudden didn't seem realistic. I mean, how am I going to be a starving actress, living in my car in LA, or working as a waitress and part-time gigs here and there? It's not realistic when you have a baby, So I'm living across the country from my family. I feel really lost. I'm trying to figure out, who am I outside of just being Logan's mom? Because that is a big common thing that happens, is people, especially for moms, I don't know about dads, so you can attest for that, but as moms, we often lose our identity in being a mom.
So good.
And people lose it too. They start referring us to, I got referred to all the time as, you're Logan's mom. And I remember thinking, but I'm more than Logan's mom. I'm still Tiffany. I'm still me. And that was something that I struggled with, was, who am I in all of this? And I began to search out and realize, you know what? I had to create who I was now. I was Logan's mom. I was still a single woman, a young woman. I had plenty of life left to live. And where do I go with this? And so I had to think about, what kind of life do I want to give my son? What kind of life do I want to give me? How can I make my son proud of me? And that was actually a really big turning point for me, is I wanted to be able to someday have my son look at me and say that he was proud of me for all my hard work and for everything that I had done for him to give him a better life. And so I decided to go back to school. And so I started that process, and I remember this so clearly, because I truly felt God was calling me to go into psychology, and that was something that I felt that I was being led to do. So I called the school. I got some recommendations for some friends, because doing online school is my only option, being a single mom and working a full-time job. That was the only way I could go back to school. So I did some research, talked to some friends, found a good college that was accredited, that could get the program I wanted. And so I called, and I was literally 3 days away from the deadline. 3 days for registration for everything to start at the semester that they were going into. And I thought, there's no way I can do this, I was literally like, okay, well, I tried. Yeah. That moment where you're like, okay, I'm going to do it, and then it didn't work out, so okay, you just move on. And a lot of people just kind of
the obstacle becomes a barrier that's not easy to overcome.
And people hit those barriers, and then lots of times they're just like, oh, well, I tried.
Sure.
And we move on.
Right.
So I remember feeling that moment almost like relieved that it wasn't going to work out, because I thought to myself, I must be crazy. I had very little support from people who were encouraging me to do this. People told me I was crazy.
Sure. You're taking on too much.
Right. I've had people tell me that I would be neglecting my child by doing this. I would be a bad parent to do this. And all I could think about is, I'm trying to do this for him. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't feel like I had a lot of support or encouragement to do it. So at one point I just kind of was like, almost felt relieved that I had almost missed the deadline. And there was a lot to do to get everything into them, because I was a brand new student. So they needed a ton of information, transcripts, you name it. And I remember thinking to myself, all right, God, if this is your will, you're just going to make it happen. So I'm just, you know what? I'm going to put my hands in the air, and it's on you.
Right. I surrender.
I surrender. If you want this to happen, you are just going to make this happen. And if not, I tried. Sure enough, 3 days later, I get a phone call. Everything was accepted. Everything got faxed to them in time, and I was now registered to start school.
Wow.
It was kind of it really was an eye-opening experience, to just how incredible things can happen when they're meant to be.
Yeah. Well, I think not only when they're meant to be, but when we decide they're going to be.
Right.
Right. We've got to there's got to be a courageous moment within ourselves where we say, you know what, enough with the excuses. Right. Enough with taking the easiest route out. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give myself to the will of the moment, right? And there's a great saying, momente mori, which is death is always with us, right? It's this concept that we've lived our life. Mm-hmm. We've had an opportunity to experience the world around us. But there's always going to be that barrier of death, right? And sometimes going back to school, it may feel like you're dying, right?
It did.
Picking a new career may feel like you're dying. But death is always with us. What we have to decide is we have to make that moment of choice to really live. To say, hey, what do I want my life to be about? And it's really interesting that you said, you really sat down and had to kind of do that internal search, that internal kind of probing of, is this the life I want? Is this the life that I want for Logan?
Right.
I really believe this, and I think that there's so many champions that are going to be watching this video that you need to take this to heart. You have the opportunity to do with your life whatever you want to do with your life. There are enemies, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be so many difficult things that you're going to have to face. But the main thing that you're going to have to overcome if you're going to ever really reach your full potential is that inner voice whispering inside of you that you're not able to do this. You have to come to a place where you say, you know what, momente mori, I'm going to die sometime anyway. I might as well live this moment as though my life can mean something and it can have some value. And when you probe your heart, just like Tiff was saying, as Tiffany was talking about, you get to another revelation that, you know what, I'm not as afraid of the things that I'm facing as the things I'll have to face if I don't make this decision to go all in.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine, as much as I love Logan and you love Logan, him having to look someday down the road and say, my mom could have, but she never found the courage.
Right.
Right? There's so many people that are going to watch our video that you have a decision to make. Maybe it's going back to school. Maybe it's starting that career. Maybe it's becoming an influencer on social media. Whatever your decision may be, maybe it's to run for mayor or to become a teacher or leave a career you're already in or become a police officer despite all of this defund the police dialogue. You're going to have a moment in your life where it takes a great amount of courage to make that decision that I'm going to live my life. And Tiffany, I don't think that there's anything that anybody could do better than make that decision that you made, which is to live my life despite how difficult it's going to be. Right? It's not that the road's going to be easy. It's not that it's going to be simple. Right? It's going to be complex. There's going to be moments when you feel like I want to just walk away. But if you continue to stir that courage within you, that fire within you, that passion within you, and you clear your mind and you really reflect on the life that you want to have, that courage will bubble up and it'll give you the strength to really face the obstacles that you have to face. Systematically come up with a plan and a strategy on how to overcome them, right? Because you had to do that. You had to sit down and strategically figure out, okay, how am I going to do X, Y, and Z? I can't go to a physical campus, so I got to do it online. Now, doing it online, I'm raising a child, so I'm changing diapers, I'm going to work every day, and so you've got to pre-install in your mindset, okay, how am I going to deal with these surprises that pop up? And life is full of surprises that pop up. And if you haven't made up your mind, those surprises will take you off course. But if you have decided that you're going to have tremendous courage, face those obstacles like the champion you were born to be, you can do great things with your life. So just real quick, obviously it's a shorter video than we normally would do. But can you leave the audience with just a final thought on courage? And facing the fear that you had to face, and what the reward of saying momente mori. Death is always with us. But really facing that and making that decision that you're going to be bold enough to overcome that anxiety or that stress or that fear.
Once you make the choice, it becomes a mental mindset. But it is this mindset you have to make. Any change in your life, you have to go into it full force and just embrace it. You have to embrace the good with the bad and know that I am going to face a lot of challenges. And let me tell you, there was many, many nights of tears and exhaustion. And I'm working full time, raising my son up till 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning doing schoolwork.
Paying that price.
And then doing it all over again. And I would not have survived if I had not had the mindset that I was not giving up. that this is the important pivotal moment in my life that I have to make this change. There is no going back.
Burn the ships.
Absolutely. Whatever it takes, whatever blood, sweat, and tears, I'm going to do it because it is important and it's a priority and it matters because it's life changing.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to remember, especially if people feel lost or they're struggling. And what do I do with my life? What do I do with myself? You know what? I say to you, if you wake up every morning thinking about something very specific, if you go to bed every night thinking about that same thing, if you dream about it, if you feel it in your spirit, then you know what? It is what you are meant to do. And it is part of who you are. So be courageous, step out of your comfort zone, and don't let fear cripple you. Because so many people let fear cripple them, and they never ever reach their full potentials because they give up before they ever hit that battle that gets them through it to the other side.
Yeah.
Because what they always say, the saying is, when you are in the storm, means there's the calm coming.
Yeah.
But you got to get through that storm, and so many people just give up during that storm because they can't do it no more. They've reached their limit. They say, I'm done, and they never reach that calm after the storm.
So good.
And so you really have to embrace the storm because it's coming.
Right.
But know that it will end.
It's awesome.
And then you will be on the other side of that, feeling proud of yourself, saying, I did this. And I can do anything.
Right.
And it's that moment where you have the courage.
Courage builds courage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? People are going to support you. People are going to not support you. People are going to try to bring you down, tear you down. And you can't let that negative influence get into your brain.
Sure.
You can't let that fear cripple you. And that fear say, I'm not good enough. I don't think I can do this. I don't think I've got what it takes. But I promise you, you have what it takes. You just have to dig deep.
So good.
And find that within yourself and say, you know what? I got this. And I had to tell myself that many times because there was times where I felt like I didn't have this, and so you just got to really just hold on to your passion and what your goal is and say, no matter what, I'm going to hit this.
So one of the elements really grinding, Tiffany, the amount of courage that it really took for you to get started, to endure. Talk a little bit about the things that you faced from that perspective as far as your stamina, your energy, your sustained go-to power that really gave you the courage to keep moving forward.
Yeah, you really have to go with you really have to make that decision and stick to it. Mm-hmm. In those moments where you are ready to throw in the flag, which I was ready to throw in the flag many times, you really have to make the choice.
You said the flag?
The flag. I was the white flag.
It's called the towel. I'm ready to throw in the towel.
I always called it a flag. I don't know. Because, in sports, they throw the flag, penalties.
Penalty flag, okay.
So I don't know. That's where I got it from. So I was ready to throw the towel in. There we go.
There we go. I've improved your day today.
There we go. So I was ready to throw the towel in. And the truth is, many times I was ready to give up and times where I was like, I'm done. But something that actually really helped me is oftentimes we only see our journeys, right? We don't see the impact we have on other people.
Sure.
So we just see our own struggles and our own fights. And what I actually discovered throughout my journey was that I was making a significant impact on other people around me.
That's powerful.
So I would have people that would be like, well, Tiffany, I am so encouraged by you. I don't know how you do this. I don't have a child. I don't have a job. I'm barely getting through school. Mm-hmm. Like, how are you doing this? At first I was kind of like, what? I'm encouraging
I'm going to school for me, not for you.
The thought that my life was impacting somebody else's other than myself and my son never occurred to me.
Yeah.
I was just doing my daily grind and facing my challenges and fighting through it as best as I could. So the thought that my life was impacting these other people never occurred to me. And so when they started saying, hey, Tiffany, you are such an inspiration. I mean, you're helping me to be able to have the courage to be able to get through this. And that's a huge difference maker lots of times too, because you're like, oh my gosh, well, I can't let these people down. And it keeps me inspired to keep fighting and keep going through my struggles because I'm making a difference on other people's lives too.
I think that's a two-way street too, 100%, right?
100%, yeah.
Courage is such a weird, intangible kind of thing, right? You recognize it when you see it,
right?
But you don't know where it comes from. I think that's a healthy way of looking at it too, is that oftentimes our courage comes through encouragement.
Yes.
Meaning someone else inspiration, them being inspired by you, gave you courage on the inside to keep going forward.
Absolutely.
But it only came as a result of their encouragement of you, that you didn't know that you were encouraging them.
Right.
It's kind of this weird cycle, right, of energy, to where we really need to become hungry for it. We need to become givers of life. And I think that is a huge step if we're going to ever become high achievers.
Yeah.
Is to realize that the fastest route to getting the courage to become our best self is by encouraging other people. 100%. Right? It's this fire inside of us that, as I encourage you, that builds courage in you. But as I see that, it also builds a fire in me as well. Yeah. Right? And so how did you respond to that? What did it do to you as you set your goals and aspirations and dreams? Because let's face it, you were the first person, or one of the first people in your family really to pursue this higher education. Right? So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I had a little brother who we were actually going to school at the same time.
Wow.
So he graduated with his bachelor's before me, but we were the only two that had our bachelor's. We're working towards our bachelor's and had it.
And not that that's everything.
Right.
Right, sure.
But honestly, it wasn't something that anybody ever expected for me to do. So it wasn't something that people saw me actually getting a degree in college. It wasn't something that people saw me aspiring to be. And so it was always a struggle for me, and
because you didn't have this self-image that was forged upon you.
No. Right? And as you said earlier, I had some learning disabilities that I had to overcome in school that created a lot of problems for me. It also created a lot of self-doubt in my own ability to be able to achieve things. And so those were struggles that I had to face growing up. So the thought of going back to college was terrifying.
Yeah.
Because I thought to myself, I don't think I have what it takes.
Not the super high performing high school student. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I had to fight for every grade I got for every class that I did. So school was very much a struggle, and here I'm about to take on essentially like a 10-year program from start to finish of a lot of heavy duty schoolwork
while working
and raising a child.
Yeah.
So it was very terrifying, and it was something that I knew that I could not let that fear and self-doubt creep in, because I believed it was what I was supposed to do.
How did you cocoon yourself from it? Did you write affirmations? Did you visualize? What was it that really fanned the flame of your courage to keep going forward, even though this wave of fear would come your way?
So it was actually two things. The first one was my son.
Okay.
So every day, especially when I was ready to give up and I was ready to just cry and throw in the towel, and I would look at him and I would think, I want him to be proud of me.
That's good. I
need him to grow up and know that his mother did everything in her power to give him the best life he could, to encourage him to be the best him he could be. So I wanted him to find that courage in himself as he grew and got older, to be the best he could and not give up when he felt that he was struggling. So, but how could I teach it if I didn't do that myself? So
if you didn't model that.
Yes, I had to be able to show him by example that I could overcome these obstacles, and even though they were massive mountains sometimes, that I could still do that.
Yeah.
And so I had to be able to show him. So I would look at him and he would give me the strength and the courage to know I had to keep going. I had to be able to do this. And so that was the first part. And then the second part is, as I realized I was making an impact on other people's lives, that would give me the courage to keep fighting, because I knew I was making a difference in not only my life, my son, but other people's as well. And I knew I was called to impact people, to help them, to minister to them. And so this was just kind of coming full circle, that I was doing what I was meant to do.
It's good.
And that continued to empower me to keep fighting the fight and find that courage to just keep pressing forward.
It's beautiful. As I'm hearing you kind of think, the psychologist in me, right? That mindset kind of student who wants to see, okay, what are the dominoes that we need to line up to really become successful? I really hear you screaming, the thing that's going to give you the most courage is to take your dream, take your vision, and really couple that with a tremendous why.
Yeah.
A why that is so important to you that it stirs you to overcome your fear.
Yeah, for sure.
A why that's so big that regardless of how you're feeling, no matter what your emotions are, that why is so important to you that it's going to consume you with a have to, right? It's not a matter of I want to, not a matter of sure would be nice. This why has to be so important that it gives you an I have to.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing, just observing your relationship with Logan, as I've had the joy of participating in now, is he's definitely a have to kind of kid, right? He inspires that love in your heart, as all our kids do, right? For our audience and ourselves included. So take your goals, take those dreams, take those things that are going to take tremendous courage to face it, whether it's social injustice or whether it's a learning disability or whether it's at poverty level and you need to get to the middle class, or you need to go from the middle class to purchasing your first home and so forth. Whatever that goal is, couple that goal, that dream and that aspiration with that momentum mori kind of mindset. Hey, I'm going to die anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just using these days that I've borrowed to accomplish as much as I can for whatever why you really have embraced. And it's so important to pick a good why. If you can pick a good why, it'll fuel you in the days of doubt. Hey everybody, this is Richard Thomas. I'm the host of the Lionheart Institute, and this is Tiffany.
Hi.
So excited that you tuned in today. It's going to take a tremendous amount of courage for you to reach your goals. I hope that if you like this video, you will subscribe to our YouTube channel. I hope you'll also like, comment, and share this video with somebody you know that's stuck, or maybe they just need that little bit of encouragement to have the courage that they need to get to where they want to be and where they're destined to be. If they'll just say, you know what, death is always with us, but I got to live this life to the fullest. God bless each one of you out there. So excited that you're part of the Lionheart Institute podcast today. Please do like, share, and comment, and let's get the word out on these streets. Much.